Hello, guys. Hope everybody's doing well. We're going to continue on today with our learning about Vietnam and about basically what the fighting was like for our soldiers over there. Before we do that, I want to give a shout out to fourth period, especially Gracie and Beja, who were two of the first people to get their work done for the last week. So great job. Keep up with the good work. You guys are doing awesome, and keep it up. Okay, so with that today, our learning will be about what our involvement in Vietnam looked like. So some of the real basics. You're going to watch a fairly long video, which will be a little 2-day thing of what Vietnam was like for our soldiers. But just to give you a rundown, so our president was Lyndon B. Johnson. The Secretary of Defense, so the guy who actually runs the military, was Robert McNamara. And then Dean Rusk was our Secretary of State. They kind of become the three-headed kind of leadership of Vietnam. With that, at the start of the war, there is a lot of support for the war. Obviously, that support will change. But at the very start, there's a ton of support for the war. And the war kind of really slowly grows from 180,000 to eventually over 500,000 troops. And then the general you will see in the video is named General Westmoreland. He's the commander of all the troops in Vietnam. So those are just some of the real basics when you watch that video, and you'll be able to see what I mean. Now, just some of the geography of Vietnam and what kind of war we are fighting. So if you remember, Vietnam is in Southeast Asia. Okay, oops. I don't know why that will turn. There we go. Vietnam is in Southeast Asia, south of China, in the area that we call Indochina. Now, with this, it is on the 17th parallel. So that is a very, very tropical part of the world. And as a result, Vietnam is incredibly hot. It's very, very dense jungles. Very rainy seasons as part of these tropical environments. So it was incredibly hard for our soldiers to fight there. Something totally away from what we have in America. Now, with this, the mode of transportation for soldiers primarily becomes helicopters. So helicopters will be able to fly into wherever the battle zones are, drop the soldiers off, and then return them when needed. Okay, so it's not like World War II where we have all these tanks and soldiers storming the beaches and all that stuff. That's just not really happening in Vietnam. It is much more of a kind of local battles that are all taking place. Okay. Now, the style of fighting is where the Viet Cong idea gets very complex. So if you remember, the Viet Cong were communist soldiers who were operating in South Vietnam. Okay. Now, the United States went there to try and protect South Vietnam from communism. So as a result, the primary fighting the United States will be doing is being against the Viet Cong soldiers in South Vietnam. Well, here's why this is so hard. These soldiers are guerrilla warriors. They don't wear uniforms, okay? You don't know who they are just by looking at them. They do surprise attacks and then run away. They use a variety of tactics that's going to make it very, very hard for us to actually know who we're fighting. The other thing about Vietnam is that it's not necessarily a land war, right? Where almost all the fighting will take place is already areas that technically are controlled by the United States, right? Our soldiers, we control South Vietnam, right? But yet most of the fighting will take place in South Vietnam, trying to hunt down and find the Viet Cong who are there. Now with this, the Viet Cong do a great job of basically not allowing the United States to ever truly fight them in huge, enormous, large-scale battles. There's not the big battles of Normandy or the Battle of Okinawa like you had during World War II. These are very localized fighting. Okay, in order to hide from the United States, the Viet Cong would build a series of very, very elaborate tunnels. I'll show you a picture in a second. Booby traps, little ambushes, hit and run, to make it very, very hard. And the United States has to try and hunt down the Viet Cong. So our strategy normally in war is to fight a land war, right? Try and take over the other enemy's land. However, that is not going to work in this situation. The United States has to try and fight a war of attrition. What a war of attrition means is basically you kill more of them than they kill of you. Okay? So the idea is you want to kill as many Viet Cong, kill or capture as many Viet Cong as possible. So then that way, eventually, they'll have to surrender. Okay? Now, that is hard because you do not measure success in land, but you measure success in body counts, which can make it very, very complex to actually try and see how well you're doing. To show you a picture here of some of the Viet Cong tunnels, you see very, very elaborate of being behind. United States soldiers could easily just be walking over this, have no idea, and the Viet Cong soldiers could just pop out, shoot, fire, and get underground before United States soldiers even knew what was happening. Another example of the guerrilla warfare, here's one of the booby traps that was discovered. So the Viet Cong were famous for setting up traps, where you walk and you hit a wire and it sets off a grenade. Or this one, which would be a pit that was covered with leaves and foliage, that when you step, boom, you fall into that. Okay? So the hard part for soldiers is that you literally, nowhere in the entire country of South Vietnam are you safe. You never know if you're walking into just an innocent village or if you are walking into, a Viet Cong army base. You have no idea, okay? So with this, the United States realizes that if they are going to win this war and actually take out the Viet Cong, they are going to have to convince the people of South Vietnam to have them help us say who is Viet Cong and who's not. Because we have no idea. But a South Vietnamese person, let's say living right here, right? A South Vietnamese person, they know who's Viet Cong in that village and who's not. So we need to try to convince the people of South Vietnam that we are here to help them. And we call this the battle for hearts and minds. The idea that we have to win over the hearts and minds of the population of the South. The problem is we are really, really, really bad at doing this. Our strategy for taking out the Viet Cong was to go and do what were called search and destroy missions. Essentially what this meant was that if we suspected that a village was held by the Viet Cong, okay, because we didn't know who in that village was Viet Cong or not, we would just go in and destroy the entire village. Burn it down. Destroy it. Okay? We would arrest any of the men there, suspect them of being Viet Cong, and leave. Okay? Now, the problem is, if you were not a Viet Cong soldier, if you were an innocent South Vietnamese farmer who just had your entire village burned down, who just looked like the bad guys? We did, right? We're the ones who destroyed your village, not the communists. So with this, we don't do a very good job as part of these search and destroy missions. I'll show you here would be one of them, right? Of burning down these villages and stuff makes it seem like we are the aggressors. We are the bad guys. In fact, the famous quote was used, "We have to destroy a town to save it." And that ultimately shows you the failure of America's strategy. You're trying to tell someone we're here to help you as we burn your village down. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Along with this, because there were so many soldiers of the Viet Cong hiding in the jungles, okay, we decided to use chemical weapons to get rid of the jungles that in South Vietnam. So if we suspected that we knew where Viet Cong were hiding at, we would send napalm bombs. Okay, napalm are gasoline bombs. So not only does it explode, but it also spreads basically fire over a huge area. And with that, a lot of very, completely innocent people were killed or badly burned by American napalm. Along with this, we use a device called Agent Orange that we would spray over the jungles that was toxic. It would kill leaves so that we could see where the Viet Cong were hiding. Well, if it's poisonous for leaves, it's also poisonous for humans. And so a lot of innocent people, including U.S. soldiers, would breathe these in and have had a ton of problems health-wise because of it. Here's a picture of one of the napalm attacks. So again, they would drop napalm and it would explode and spread fire everywhere, unfortunately affecting innocent people. And this is one of the really famous images of a napalm attack on a village. And you can see the children running away burned from the attack. And kind of, again, we're saying that we're here to help these people. These are South Vietnamese people, right? These are the people living in the area that we control, that we are doing this to, and it's hard that we're not doing a good job winning over their hearts and minds. Now, unfortunately, these also have an effect back home. And as Americans see on TV what is really happening in Vietnam, they begin to question our leadership. Okay, Vietnam is the first ever war that actually has TV around for. So no one had ever seen what war actually looked like. The only time you'd seen what war looked like was through government released photos, government released videos. Okay? In World War II, we don't have video of some of the really bad things that Americans might have done. Right? In Korea, we don't have videos of that. But in Vietnam, we do. We have and see the videos of our soldiers burning down villages. We see the videos of us napalming villages. And we begin to question in America if this war is really worth it. Is this what America is about? So Vietnam War is called the living room war. It's because it's the idea of it's not only being fought in Vietnam, it's being fought in every single house in America. As Americans see it for the first time, they see what America's like at war. And it really turns a lot of people off to the idea. What it leads to is what we call the credibility gap. The idea that President Johnson, you'll see this in the video, keeps coming out and saying, we're winning. Look how many people we've killed of them. We've killed 300 Viet Cong soldiers for every one American. And he says all these positive things. But yet, when we watch on TV, we see United States soldiers being ambushed out of nowhere, right? And the Viet Cong running away. We hear the interviews with soldiers where they sound like they don't, want to be there. They don't like what's going on there. And we realize that what the Johnson administration is telling us is not what is happening in reality. And for the first time, really, Americans begin to question on a kind of national-wide scale what their government's telling them. And with that, I have a cartoon here to show you, the truth about Vietnam and the government whitewashing it, right? Painting it over, hiding it. And that's a very common feeling that people saw with Vietnam, okay? So this will be our last video for this week because your assignment is to watch about 30 minutes or so of a documentary that I posted on there. So I'm giving you guys Friday off as a gift to you guys, because Thursday is going to take you a little bit longer. So make sure that you work on that. And a great job on week 2. I miss you guys. We'll be back soon. Don't worry. And if we're not, we'll just keep trucking along. Okay? So great job. Keep it up. You're all awesome. See you guys.